Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brianne Roth. I am the Public Programs Coordinator here at the NHA, and I want to welcome you all here for another installment of our Fall 2016 Food for Thought. It's our second to last one, so we have one more next week, so thank you all for joining us today. If everyone could please take a moment to silence your cell phones, they'd be much appreciated. We'll get things started with Katie in just a moment. As always, we'd like to thank you, and a special thank you to the MS Worthington Foundation and our media sponsorship generously provided by Novation Media. Today's speaker, many of you in the audience know her already, but I'm going to give her a brief introduction. Her name is Katie Kaizer, and she's a renowned and accomplished local photographer. She grew up on Nantucket, and after many years of living and traveling to different places, she returned to the island to live and work year-round. Specializing in weddings and family portraits, Katie is based on Nantucket, but has traveled for destination weddings around the world. Her work has been featured in Boston Weddings Magazine, Newport Wedding Magazine, Only Nantucket, Well Wed Magazine, Island Weddings, N Magazine, and on Huffington Post Weddings, as well as Style Me Pretty. She was also recently named one of the top 20 wedding photographers for the Boston and greater area by the Bride Box, a premier monthly subscription service devoted to newly engaged brides. In addition to weddings and portraits, Katie also works with many nonprofit organizations and humanitarian organizations in Nantucket and elsewhere. Her assignments and projects have taken her to Africa, Belize, Guatemala, and Australia. Please join me in giving a warm round of applause for Katie Kaizer.
Hi, everyone. Is my mic, can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. I was so excited to come and give one of these talks. I have a lot of friends that have presented here, so it feels really fun to be up here. And in this audience alone, I know so many of you, so thank you for coming. It's sort of a treat. We have one of the brides that I photographed, two mothers of the brides, and my mom's here too. But yeah, it's really exciting to be up here in front of you all. As Brianne said, I grew up on Nantucket. After going to undergrad in North Carolina, I did a lot of seasonal work. I had studied communication studies and was always taking photos. Even when I was younger, I did scrapbooks and sort of had Facebook going in scrapbooks before Facebook was a thing. There's shelves and shelves of them. So I knew I loved taking photographs, and I didn't necessarily make that my career right away. It was a few years later, in 2009, I went to the New England School of Photography, and I did the 2-year professional program there, studied visual journalism and wedding and portraiture, and it was sort of a time where I thought I wanted to be a photographer. It's a sort of a leap that a lot of people make, but I think now more than ever it's important to go and study and really learn the ropes and kind of learn the rules to break the rules when it comes to making pictures. So I wanted to start with a slideshow that I put together. You'll probably know a lot of people in it, and it's wedding and portrait work. And I was sort of asked to talk a little bit about little tips on better ways to photograph people, you know, your kids around the holidays. There's a lot of photographs happening. So there's really simple tips on no matter what you're taking photos on, even if it's your iPhone, things that you can do to make a better looking photo. And so I put together a presentation after that. Feel free, I know we're gonna do questions at the end, but if anyone has a really important question, it's fine with me if you wanna speak up and raise your hand. So I will give you this slideshow, and I will come back to you after, and we'll see if it starts like it's supposed to. So here we go. I think we need sound, though. Sound? Oh, it's coming. Hold on, there's sound. Let's try it again. Are we good? Try again. There we go.
I had a dream so big and loud, I jumped so high, I touched the clouds. Whoa. I stretched my hands out to the sky. We danced with monsters through the night. I'm never gonna look back. Whoa, never gonna give it up. No, please don't wake me now. Hey! This is gonna be the best day of my life. My life. This is gonna be the best day of my life. My life. gonna be the best day of my life. My life. This is gonna be the best day of my life. My life. I hear it calling outside my window. I feel it in my soul. The stars were burning so bright. The sun was out till midnight. I say we lose control. This is gonna be the best day of my life. My life. This is gonna be the best day of my life. My life. This is gonna be the best day of my life. My life. This is gonna be the best, gonna be the best, gonna be the best of my life.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much. I am just going to pull up my first ever PowerPoint presentation that I ever made. But before I go into that, I hope that watching the slideshow made you feel something. I love photography because we tell a story and we connect with human emotion. And one of the most sort of moving, inspiring things I heard at a workshop that was called the Inspiration Workshop in Newport last spring was that anyone can learn how to use the tools. So anyone can learn how to use a camera. But if you connect to what you see and what you feel, that's what's going to make your work different. And I think that's across the board for any profession. It's really what we're putting into it as a person that makes it unique and original. So to me, that's a selection of photos that I really connect with. And I feel as I'm moving through my career, which I'm very still new, about 5 years in, I'm feeling better about taking the chances and getting closer to the moments and staying in the camera, which I'll talk about a little, to capture moments that are not super set up, super posed. There might have been a few in that slideshow, and I'm sure you noticed the more traditional portraits. But really, when the fun moments happen is when there's more chaos, when there's rain at a wedding. I will touch on it later, but one of the recent things that was so amazing to me, we went to shoot a wedding in Wisconsin, and you might have seen the quick photos. Sorry, the slideshow, the photos were so quick. But there was a photo of a girl in the hospital it was her sister and the newborn baby. And I always have been hearing from mentors that those are really the most exciting things, or the things that are not planned and the things that are unexpected. So we arrived at the bride and groom's house in Wisconsin 2 hours away from the wedding. It was raining. The family members were putting up another tent. It was someone I knew from college. So it was chaos. And in the midst of it all, her sister, who we had sat across from the night before, who was due in 3 weeks, had gone into labor. So we walk in, and the bride's name was Trixie, and she just looks at me, and she's like, if I put on my dress right now, do we have time to go to the hospital? And I grabbed my second shooter, Carrie Tozer, who's a great, talented guy, and I said, they want to go to the hospital, but I don't want to drive them to the hospital on their wedding day. Like, will you drive the rental car, and we'll GPS it? So we put the bride and the groom in our little rental car, and we went to the hospital room, and they met their new nephew, who was hours old. And I just remember I could hear the voices of my mentors and my teachers, being, that's when you shoot, that's when you stay in the camera, that's when you shoot a lot. And you can't get distracted by what's happening in front of you. It's this amazing, interesting, beautiful thing, but you still have to make interesting, beautiful photos. And sometimes when you go to a new place, I know a lot of people travel in the winter, and it's something my instructor, Glenn Cooper, said at the New England School of Photography. We all arrived in Guatemala for this photography workshop, and he said, don't just make a picture of an interesting thing, make an interesting picture. So, with that moment, I really felt like I was honing in on all the things I'd learned, because we could have made, just any kind of normal photos, but I really tried to get in close and make nice compositions. And again, we only had probably 10 minutes where we were in there. And they kept trying to get us to hold the baby. And I was like, no, we don't want to hold the baby. I just want to take photos. And Carrie was like, I've never seen a baby this little. He was just shocked. So that's sort of a story that I plan on telling all of my future brides and grooms, is to really relax and embrace what is not expected. And I think that's something that we can apply to life too. So many people are here. They entitled this Capturing the Moment. And again, I think some of the moments up there, the bride putting cake in her sister's face instead of feeding the groom, those things are really unexpected. So people with kids, family members, we all know these moments happen. And this is just a couple tips. Say you go out to photograph your kids, your grandkids, your friends, on what you can do to make even better photos, whether it's with your phone, cameras. I know a lot of you in here have, professional cameras and are photographers too. So it's really, this is kind of a wide range. If you guys have more technical questions, we can definitely do those too. And contact me, because I like to talk about this stuff. So first of all, photographing people is fun. And this is sort of like one of my favorite photos. Bride and groom, and they want a photo with all the kids. And we do these a lot. And this ended up being featured in Newport wedding magazines. That couple actually used to live here, Mary Beth and Jeff. And it's just hilarious. But that's a moment where if I put the camera down and was trying to tell the kids to pay attention, I would have missed that. So when I talk about staying in camera, you have to be glued to your camera. It should be right. That should be where you're looking the whole time, and you're listening to what's going on. Sometimes I'm shooting and then I hear a kid acting up or being funny, and I just you turn and you might bump into things. You don't really, but you have to get the moment. So you just stay in camera, and I just love that photo so much. So photographing people is fun. The things to consider when making photographs and portraits, and again, I didn't make it super specific, but with anywhere or anything that you're shooting, you want to think about your location. You want to think about your light, your framing and background, the moment, which you might not know what it is yet, but staying ready for it. And focal length is sort of a more technical thing, but I think it's important because I see a lot of people starting out, and it's just one of those things to think about. And even if I can expound on that later, but it's sort of a technical thing that can make a big difference. So with that, I'll just talk a little bit about location. And I mean, on Nantucket, we're so blessed. We have amazing locations. So I do a lot of family portraits in the summer. We do a lot at Brent Point, Nantucket. I try to encourage new places whenever possible, but you want a place that's comfortable, a place that has a variety of backgrounds and good light. And I'll talk more about light as we move forward. But you can see here, I'm shooting with the light on the kids on the bridge. It's sort of a fun, they're moving moment. And then the shaded kind of pine tree area is a different look. And I just think why not maximize your time with your subject, do some different backgrounds. So think about that. You also, in this one sequence, I use, the green background, the blue skies, and then the backlit look against the dunes. And that's something I'll talk about more with light. But, it just makes for a nice variety. You don't want to come out of a little portrait session or whatever it is you're trying to photograph and have all the photos look the same. So if something's not working, change it. And that's one of my best pieces of advice. You don't have to tell whoever you're photographing that it's not working. And on the wedding day, the first thing I tell my second shooters, I'm like, if you're trying to do something and it is not working, pretend it's working and then move them on. So if you are working with clients or subjects, you don't need to tell them oh, this didn't work, and then because they're not going to like hearing that. So here I love to framing with the sky. That's the light on the subject, open shade, and then the light behind the subject. And I think we see photos all the time, and people will say, how do you do that? Every wedding, I have someone's uncle come up to me and say, how are you shooting into the light? And I can talk more about that, but it's just, it's just another technique. So with light, so that's location, just a place with a lot of variety is nice. Different types of light will make your photos look different, of course. The direction of light is really important. So light on your subject, light behind your subject, the quality of light, so sunny days, overcast, open shade, and the time of day. And a lot of people in here that work in visual stuff, the videographers in the audience, they know all about this. Everyone wants to shoot around sunset. But you can make nice photos even in the middle of the day. You just need some open shade, some softer light. So especially with babies or grandkids or little kids, they don't do well in the sun because they squint and their eyes close right up. So indoor window light, open shade is really nice for when you're photographing little tiny kids. And there's Evan, who volunteered to be my subject. And this is just at high noon, and it's in a little courtyard near our apartment. But in the photo over here, the light is coming from behind him. So I've exposed, which I'll explain more, for the front of him, for that exposure. And you get that sort of like ring of light on his hair. You see the leaves are lighting up. And that's one way that you can photograph your subject. And then literally we just switched places and I put him in the sunshine. Not ideal in the middle of the day because you get harsh shadows and people tend to squint. He did a good job keeping his eyes open. But these are the two main things, and I'll show you more. You really want the light to be on your subject or coming from behind them. So it's something to think about. And especially with little kids, I think backlighting and open shade is really good. What you want to avoid is side light. It's not as flattering. And again, I'm sorry, Evan, I even put it in the notes. Side light can be not as flattering because you get weird highlights, weird shadows. It's a common mistake I see in really green portrait photographers. And sometimes there's a reason to just go with the moment and capture candids, and it might end up like that. But even then you want to look if it's a candid moment for your highlights because that's where the viewer looks first. But for a nice portrait, if you have control over your subject and your setting, try to avoid side light because it's just not as flattering. And so I have some examples of this. This is, again, the light is on my subject. So everyone loves Brent Point, but the thing about Brent Point is until the very last hours of daylight, it is extremely bright. If your subject's on the lighthouse they're looking towards the sun. So encourage people to interact. When the light is on your subject, it's good for candid moments. You want to avoid them squinting at the camera, obviously. So it's, having the light coming from behind me, but having them interacting, it's a nice even light. And this is something we think about at the weddings. We want the bride and groom to be in even light. We don't want them, one to be blinded and one to be in shadow. So this is just an example of some fun moments. And then another direction, the one picture I had with Evan with the trees behind him, this is a similar thing. This is Nantucket. You all know this spot. But this is backlighting, and it just means that I've turned their backs to the light, so the sun's coming from over in that corner. And the kids are able to keep their eyes open, and it's much more flattering. So it's just something to think about when you're photographing people. The light, again, is coming from behind the subjects on the dunes, and this gives a nice soft look to the photos. The dunes will light up at the end of the day, and if you have a camera that you know how to control manually, you want to expose for that front of them. On the iPhone, you can even just tap their face. Like if you have the phone on a person, you tap their face and the phone will adjust, and you can even adjust on the iPhone the brightness, and you can edit it later too. But better to do it right away. And then open shade and overcast light is a really pretty, flattering light. And if you don't have a lot of experience taking portraits, but you get a good cloudy day, this is a good time to go out and practice. And one of the easiest ways to figure out, there's always a direction of light, even if it's overcast. So if it's overcast, you can move your subjects around and figure out still where the sun would be. I mean, there's an app for it, or you just might know the island, but you can also hold your hand up and just do a circle and see where your hand is the brightest, and then you'll know that that's the light is coming from the opposite place of your hand. So these are just overcast portraits. Again, you're encouraging kind of fun moments, but it's really a pretty soft light. It's sort of like there's a soft box over the sun. And we love that. And it makes it easier to photograph people. And the time of day is really important. So everyone talks about the magic hour or the golden hour. And that's about an hour before sunset or an hour after sunrise. Within those hours, here the sun is behind them. And I'm, again, like exposing for them. But it's just a lot prettier. It's a lot more flattering. It's a much more forgiving light. It's kind of like dimming the lights at your dinner table so that everyone looks better. I don't know if you do that. We do that sometimes. And again, here's some more photos during the magic hour, or it's also called the golden hour. And I just really enjoy photographing at that time. You can play with the light when you get a little bit more experience. You can play with the flare of the light. You can do all kinds of stuff. In this photo, I'm lying on the ground, kind of framing with the light that's bouncing off the shells at Brent Point. So it's interesting. I had a lot of teachers tell me you want to make sure you get a variety of photos. You want to think about high, low, close, and far. So whenever we're sort of stuck on an idea or we're out there shooting, you want to shoot a wide photo, make the people little in the frame. You want to shoot from low or from high and make a variety of photos. Here, because I'm low, the horizon is sort of cutting them like mid-body. It's not quite their waist, so that's kind of nice. So that is a little bit about when to shoot. And sometimes it's hard to get up for sunrise, but it's worth it. And then this is just simply before sunset. It had been a stormy day, but the sun was coming through. And this is sort of the light on the couple. So that real orange glow is beautiful. And that's something to go for. And if you're at Brent Point, you can see, this is not Brent Point, but if you go down there, you can sort of see when the light changes and you get that last bit of really golden light. We see it on my dad's boat a lot too. And it's really beautiful. So, and it's easier for people to look into that light. They don't have to squint. Here they're not looking, but that's okay. Okay, and then another thing to think about always is framing and background. So the rule of thirds, you've probably heard of it if you like photography or you take photographs. And it's explained as the rule of thirds involves mentally dividing up your image using 2 horizontal lines and 2 vertical lines, as shown below. You then position the important elements in your scene along those lines or at points where they meet. And to me, this is sort of the first thing they taught us. You want to exercise this, and it might feel weird to put your subject off to the side, but if you have subjects that are walking, you might want to put them, I'll show you some examples, over on the frame and give them a place to walk through. You want to avoid dead center. I mean, you can do it, and if you learn the rules, you can break the rules. So it's good to practice this, and then there's times where having your subject in the center of the frame really works, and you'll know those times the more you do it, but make yourself practice this. So instead of taking a photo where people are right in the middle of the frame, or your subject, whatever that is, try to think about these points. So these are some examples. This is an example of a rule of thirds. This is in Jamaica, and this is a couple that also used to live here, and they brought me down to shoot their wedding. But I kind of like the trees are cutting into that right third. They're on the left third. They're sort of in the lower third, and it's a little more dramatic than if it had just been them in the middle with a little bit of sky. I sort of feel like they're floating up there. It's kind of fun. And another example. Again, you guys can see the horizon is in that lower third of the frame, and our couples are on the right, and especially with the couple up top, they have a place to move. And the boat's in the middle, but I don't really mind that. It's all a matter of experiment, really. But that's some examples of the rule of thirds, which is something to think about. And moving on, capturing moments. For me, this is sort of the icing on the cake is when you have families that really want to play and interact and be real in front of the camera. So encourage your kids to play and do what they love, and or your friends or whoever you're photographing. Some people just want to stand in front of the lighthouse and smile, and that's fine. But I really like to make them move around or send the parents on a walk and get the kids to play, because this is what makes your kid, this dad is so cute, and he kept popping up there and surprising the kid, and I just love that photo for that reason. And again, I'm shooting, you can see here, the light is coming from behind them. So she has that halo on her hair. They're a little bit centered, but there's 3 of them, which works really well. Their expressions are kind of spread out, and I don't know. So encouraging moments is really important. I have another thing I wanted to tell you about, which is to stay in camera. And this is what I was talking about before. So if I had put the camera down at any point, I would have missed one of these moments. It doesn't mean that you have to hold your finger on the shutter. With digital photography, a lot of people take so many photos really quickly. It doesn't mean that. It just means to stay in your camera and be looking through your viewfinder, and you are choosing those moments. So it's not an accident. And people like having a little sequence of photos, and you have to move with your subjects a lot too. So my favorite types of portraits are these, and when people are interacting and having fun. And I mean, of course, she put on that nice outfit for the portrait session. It's not really just a day at the beach, but it could be. And I encourage them to run around, play in the water, and be real kids. And there was some portraits in the slideshow of the Ruley twins, the girls with the flowers, the Iller family on their boat. And those portraits are more day in the life. It's sort of what they would be doing. And that's nice to capture. Moving on, again, moving around with my subjects. I end up soaking wet at most of my portrait shoots. And I'm thinking about getting an underwater setup just so that I can get even more in the water with my subjects. But I'm always running backwards, running side to side, getting close, getting far away and letting them come to me. It's just a lot of movement. It should feel like work when you're out there making pictures. And so that's a really fun thing for me. And this is an overcast day. You can see we have Nantucket fog, and it's really flattering on the kids. It's really pretty. No one has to really squint with that, except that they're smiling a lot. So that's a little more about getting moments and encouraging moments. On a wedding day, so much is happening. If you get the family together for Thanksgiving, there's going to be so much happening that you might be able to just capture moments as they happen. But if you have people that come to you looking for photos, you want to encourage movement and interaction or have someone tell a joke just to loosen them up a little bit. And then this is a little bit more technical, but I thought it was important. So when we're taking photos, we're thinking about exposure, we're thinking about all the technical elements, but this was one of the most important things I learned in photography school, and it's a simple, I promise it's not super technical, but it's the distance between the point of convergence in the lens to the sensor. And you can see in the diagram that I borrowed from the internet, it's not something to overthink. What it really means is that you can be standing a certain distance to your subject, and just depending on what lens you're using, the photo is going to look completely different. So I did bring some of my camera gear here, and I'll show you examples. This is a longer lens. This is a nice portrait lens. It's a 70 millimeter to 200, and it's going to give you no distortion, really pretty results. This is a lens I use a lot, and it is a zoom lens. Then there's other lenses that are fixed, a 50 millimeter lens. This is smaller, and this means there's no zoom, so I would move myself to sort of make the frame. But I'll show you an example before I talk more about the specific lenses. And thank you, Evan, for being my subject again. We did this in the parking lot behind our apartment, and it's just, hopefully you can see the numbers. So the top left, I'm standing in the same spot. It would be as if I were photographing one of our ladies in the front row, and I did not move my feet. I just changed lenses. So I'm staying put, he's staying put, and this is the difference you get in your photos. So the first one on the left is 200 millimeters. That's with the big lens zoomed all the way out. 100 millimeters, I've zoomed back. And you're also going to get a different look aesthetically, which I can talk about. 50 millimeters, 35 millimeters. And, you know, for a portrait, I don't try to shoot too much wider than 35 millimeters unless I'm getting in really close. You can end up with some distortion, which I'll talk about. But these are really nice portrait lengths. And really a 50 millimeter on a full frame sensor camera is gonna be, they call it like the normal view. So that's what you're gonna see as a person too. That's what your eyes will see. So it's nice for portraits. It's really realistic because that's sort of what it would look like if I was standing there viewing the subject. And then 24 millimeters were much wider and you get more of your environment. And that can be nice if you're making a picture of someone and you want the environment in there. And then 60 millimeters, your subject's gonna get a lot smaller. They might get a little lost. And again, if you're framing them against a big, beautiful sunset, or there's a reason to have the environment in there, then you can use a wide lens. But you wanna be careful, if you get close with a wide lens, your subject can look funny or distorted, and we sort of wanted to show you that here. So, you know, I mean, it's fun, you can play around with it, and sometimes with kids it works, but you wanna make it intentional. So I'm intentionally closer to my subject with a wide lens, and I'm photographing Evan being silly up there. But out here, you know, with the wide lens, there's still some distortion, and you can see pictures of people where their head is getting like sucked out of the frame, and that's not great. If you're on a dance floor and the bride and groom are in the middle, it's okay if the people on the edges are a little bit more distorted, but you can correct this in post-production, but it's something you want to avoid. So when it's possible, it's better to use longer lenses for portraits, I would say, as a rule of thumb. So that's sort of what I wanted to talk about with focal length. And I have some other favorite moments I just wanted to share. I do a lot of work outside of Nantucket, and this was in Dominica for a film contest that we got selected for. Kristen Kellogg and I went down, and this is just one of my favorite moments. I was glued to the camera. I knew the horse was gonna run by, but we didn't know this dog was gonna come running by. And the frame after it just wasn't as great with the movement of the feet and the dirt, and the dog is cut off, but it sort of makes for a fun photo. So again, to me, that's a real, like, a moment that if I had taken one and stopped and looked down, I would have missed. So that's sort of a fun moment to share. Yeah, what's that? No, I think the horse was fine. I think they're used to it down there. And this woman actually races horses, so that was really neat to meet her. And then we have one of my favorite portraits of all time, and this was in the San Blas Islands in Panama, and it's just a fun, great moment. I met this shopkeeper, and we were chatting, and everyone said, oh, they don't like being photographed on there, be really aware of it. But I just find sometimes if you are traveling and you connect with your subject, it's okay, and sort of ask if you can take pictures. And this is, again, sort of rule of thirds. He's off to the side. It's a smile that is sort of involves his whole face. There's a term for that, like a Doshen smile, and he's really like cracking up. And this wasn't the photo. I had so many photos before this, and then I still had the camera near me, and then someone started doing something funny, and this smile had nothing to do with me, and I got that shot, and I love that. He's very expressive. So that's a nice portrait. And what else is in here? This is another fun portrait. This is an example of using a wide angle close to your subject for purpose. So it's not like the photo of Evan's head getting sucked out of the frame or looking silly, but it's a matter of, of course he could have whacked the camera, but it would be worth it to get the photo. So you don't just put someone on a swing, you don't just tell them to sit still. I encourage movement and then moving close. And this was for the Dominica film project. So this was just a really fun shot, and the framing worked out well, but I was in the camera and I was really waiting for that. It would be a different photo if the rope was directly in the middle of his face. I like that it's off to the side. These are just little things that I'm really picky about now. But that was my favorite shot of that sequence. So that's, to me, a really fun moment as well. And then this is something that's a little bit more, from being farther away and observing a scene. I think when we travel, again, we get so overwhelmed with beautiful places and new places, but I like to wait for a moment, even if it's a subtle moment, just moving the boat. It was a beautiful photo even before the kids came over to the boat. And I was on one of the San Blas Islands in Panama, and I was just waiting for something a little more. And it's what my instructors used to tell me. You might have the scene, but you have to be patient. And then it's a lot of what they say if you're doing street photography, or say you go down to Main Street, Nantucket, and you want to make an interesting photo. Set yourself up and really look at your backdrop, and then you kind of wait for things to happen if you have time. And this was one of those moments. So the kids were, heading out to fish, and I just really loved the one kid pushing the boat and the other kid having a little fishing net. So to me, that's it's special to wait and capture that one moment on purpose as well. So that was a fun photo I wanted to share. And I think that's it for the photos and the slideshow and the PowerPoint. So I want to answer questions. If people have more technical questions or you want to hear any stories, I'd be happy to tell you anything. That's the bride, Sarah, that works at the NHA. And my second shooter got those photos of me shooting them, which was really nice. I wear that sling thing that's new, and so I have 2 different cameras on me all the time, one with a long lens, one with a 50 or a wider lens. And that's another couple. We talked our way onto one of the Hinckley boats. They had nothing to do with that boat, but we improvised. So that's at the White Elephant. And it's fun. I mean, I think with photography, like anything that you do, it's just a matter of really knowing yourself and your gear and pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. And for me, it's a really exciting thing because it doesn't stop with one venue or one place or one island. It's sort of there's this whole world out there, and I'm going to do a conference in Charleston and a workshop in Texas that's going to be very challenging, but you have to do it. And to me, that's what's exciting about it. And I meet with brides a year and a half out, and I tell them, the photos are only going to get better, God willing. If you like the work now, that's great, but the idea is that you're always pushing and moving forward, and if you're not, I think it can get kind of, then it might get a little boring. And I see sometimes we go to these venues over and over again, and my goal is to make a new, interesting photo of the White Elephant or of Brent Point Lighthouse. So we really try, and there's something about that couple that's going to be different and unique, and I really try to bring that into the photos. And the imperfections are that much better. So that's sort of my approach and a little bit of advice. Again, even if you're using your iPhone, tapping on the little iPhone screen, it'll focus on people's faces. There's a little sun that comes up. You guys can try it, and you can edit the photos after, but even with your iPhone, there's a lot you can do taking photos. And so, yeah, that's sort of my little spiel. And I'd love to answer some questions. I know there's people in here that take a lot of photos, and if you have specific questions about exposure, anything like that, I can talk to you more about it today or, whenever. And I'm really easy to find. I have cards, and I'm on Facebook, and I have a business page and an Instagram, which is really fun to follow. It's all happy, fun, positive things. And So I would love to take some questions if you guys are ready.
Let's have a round of applause for Katie. And if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll come over and I'll hand you the microphone just so we can hear your question. We've got a question here.
Katie, who are the photographers that you admire?
That's such a great question. I knew it. I knew you were going to ask that. So obviously growing up, I looked up to a lot of the big, amazing photographers, National Geographic photographers. We talked a lot about Lindsay Addario. She was one of the Nat Geo photographers that was held hostage for a while. She's a really amazing, talented photographer who's really dedicated her whole life to being a photographer. We went and saw Kerry Walensky speak, and he was a sort of a photographer I didn't know as much about, but he was at the Athenaeum, also a National Geographic photographer. He was really inspiring on so many levels, and I've begun following his work. I follow Steve McCurry, a lot of the big names out there, but then also more locally and regionally, I sort of have these different tiers of people I look up to, or just different regions of people. So I follow a lot of wedding and portrait photographers out of Boston. This community called the Fearless Photographers and if you're interested at all, write that down or email me, but it's this network of people, and a lot of them are journalists turned wedding photographers, so they're pushing the envelope constantly, and they're winning awards, and they have a whole network that you can join, and that's who I'm going to the conference with, and also the workshop. There's a couple called Ben and Erin Chrisman. They have Chrisman Studios, and they're just an international, really well-known, it went away, photography duo, and they have a bunch of associates, but they're just incredible. There's so many that I look up to, and there's a woman, if you like really raw, real sort of moments, family portraiture, day in the life type work, there's a woman called Kirsten Lewis, and she's just mind-blowing. She's the best. She's the reason I signed up for that workshop, and she was one of the people that said you really need to tap into what you see. And so that's the sort of the direction I always want to move in with my portraiture, is the more real and the more raw moments. Of course, we live in a vacation town, so a lot of people also just want to look really pretty in front of the Lighthouse, and we do that. But I really, personally, I like those more storytelling sessions, and she is probably one of the best in the world. So I follow lots of people, and lots of people here. I mean, we just had a meeting last night with our Photography Alliance group, and it's so much fun to be part of a network here, and everybody's so supportive. I think Nantucket, that rings true across the board, but it's really fun to be, Kit Noble, Dan Driscoll, and all of our kind of creatives, because we all do very different work, so it's fun. So it's important to always look at work, even if you are, need a little inspiration or you want some visual just stimulation. Looking at the New York Lens blog, so the New York Times Lens blog is the blog, and they have amazing stories every day from around the world. And I actually do that. Before I go to a wedding, I sit down and I look at recent work from Chrisman Studios. I look at the New York Times Lens blog. I just look at work to feel inspired too. So lots of people, but yeah, thank you.
Do you have any other questions? That one up front.
I'm just curious about, we have wonderful sunsets and sunrises here on Nantucket, but I find that taking pictures of them, many times the color doesn't come through as it is in the sky.
Interesting. Yeah, so sometimes one of the most, are you photographing people with them or no? It's just the sunsets. It's sometimes if the exposure is too light, then the colors will be a little washed out. So I tend to, you can sort of underexpose, which means it might look really dark on the back of your camera, but you're going to capture more of the color and the light. And if you're shooting with a camera that has the ability to shoot a raw file format, you're going to capture more information than a JPEG too. But I think the colors, sometimes they do just look more beautiful in person, but if you can do photos, I'd have to look at what you're shooting with, but if you can make it a little darker, I think you basically want where the sun is. A lot of times I see photos where it's a great sunset, but that last bit of light is totally blown out, and you can't bring that back with digital, so you want to make it darker, make sure there's information in that last bit of sun, and you can bring up the shadows a little in Photoshop or in Lightroom or even iPhoto, and there's going to be information and colors hidden in those shadows. It's sort of the opposite of what you would think of with film. So with digital, you really want to make sure you capture that, make sure you have information in the highlight part of your photo, so the brightest part of your photo. You don't want there to be sort of blown out pixels there. If it's a sunset, you want to make sure there's information. But I could look at more too that you do. So that's about sunsets.
Anything else? Oh, we got one in the back with Lindsay Squares.
Do you have any tips for photographing pets? I have a very cute, very excited little dog, and I always see these amazing pictures that people take of their pets, and mine just doesn't sit still, and he's blurry a lot, and so I was just wondering if you had any tips on photographing animals.
Yes, and you have a camera. I see you taking photos all the time. One of the biggest things with animals, so you want to, first of all, get on their level. So when I'm photographing dogs, especially, I'm usually laying on my stomach, and it's harder to move around, but you want to be like crouched down, be on their level. You might have blurry photos if your shutter speed is too slow. So making sure you're at a higher shutter speed if they're running around like a 400 or 500th of a second, which if you're inside or it's cloudy, it might mean your ISO has to go up. And I can talk to you more about that. But definitely if it's looking a little blurry, it would be your shutter speed isn't fast enough. And it can help to have a friend there to help you with the dog or the subject holding a treat. It's tricky. I mean, dogs are tricky, but you want to also be really concerned about where you're putting your focus. So you want the focus to be, on the animal's eyes most likely, and then use a bigger depth of field so there's a little more in focus and also a little more margin for error. So if they jump forward a little, you would probably still have them in your focus plane. And the focus plane you're controlling with all of your technical elements. It's something I can talk more about. It's sort of this dance between your f-stop and your shutter speed and your ISO. So figuring out what's most important and then making a good exposure. And now with the digital cameras, you can do so much. I mean, we shoot here a lot in the Whaling Museum with natural light, and it's amazing what the cameras can do. And you don't need to add flash really until it gets a lot darker or add off-camera lights. So with animals, yeah, definitely higher shutter speed. Having some friends there to help is good. I mean, dogs are tricky for sure. But that would be my 2 cents on that.
Great. If we don't have any other questions, let's give one final round of applause for Katie. You are also welcome to come up and talk to her after this is over. Thank you, Katie. Next week, we will close out our fall Food for Thought series with 2 scientists from the Center for Coastal Studies out of Provincetown, Massachusetts. So please do come back next week. They will be talking about North Atlantic right whales and humpback whales. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.